Welcome to Real Vision. My name is Santiago Velez, co-founder of Block Digital, and I'm excited to bring to you today our guest, Pavel Bains. He is the CEO of BlueZell. Welcome.
Hey, Santiago. Thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to this interview with Real Vision.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm sure you've seen many of our interviews. We like to do deep dive, long form kind of conversations on projects that we think are interesting and have a potential impact on the industry. So before we get into what you guys are working on at BlueZell, I'd love to hear about you yourself, your journey, how you got into blockchain, and then eventually how you got to forming BlueZell.
Oh yeah, it's love talking about this. So my background is actually from video game space. And it'll be funny as we talk about this later on how everything comes full circle. But yeah, I was in the video game space. I used to run video game studios like for Disney Interactive when they used to have internal studios. So I was managing a bunch of them, and then also in the independent studios because I'm from Vancouver originally. So now I live in Singapore. But Vancouver is a hotbed for video games, and so running studios, I'd work with Electronic Arts, Activision, Nintendo, so name them all, and I always did either running the studio or biz dev, licensing, and even sometimes mergers and acquisitions. Uh, so after ended up not wanting to do games anymore, launched a digital publishing platform for kids. This was when the iPad was first coming out, and I had just had my first two kids, and we had realized that hey, we're having I'm on the iPad. My kids are coming up in that age. They'll probably use it. Everybody else I know my age was having kids and they were on iPads and professionals. So there was actually a wave in about 2012 to 2014 where, hey, family apps were doing it. So we had a company called Story Panda, which we got funded by Falcon Startups. They were going through a big, think family investing because a lot of the partners in Falcon Startups actually had kids. The funny thing was in that 2 year frame or year and a half, iPad apps went from, hey, people will buy books on them to we want everything free. So every family thesis, even ours, no matter what we did with all these books, like we had Batman books, Snoopy, all these, you couldn't sell them because all of a sudden people just wanted everything for free. And so that thesis just didn't play out. So then after that, I was just kind of video games, doing that, burnt out, the startup didn't work out and just, needed a break. And during that time, was saying, discovered Bitcoin, blockchain, went down the rabbit hole, and then met my partner, the co-founder, Neeraj in BlueZell. And we just started BlueZell as kind of a project of doing work in the blockchain space, kind of like most others, like just trying to figure things out. Like we do some development work here, consulting here, and then took us to about 2017 when we kind of formed BlueZell and what the current state was like decentralized storage. So that's my background. It's all video games and finance.
That's interesting. So you saw a big problem, after kind of looking at the landscape and saying, these are the things, this is the trajectory that the industry is going in. What did you see was the big problem that needed to be solved? And how did you eventually land on, decentralized file storage? And we can get into that. But what did you think was such a big problem?
It was really my CTO, he and co-founder. He in around 2017, when the first wave of Ethereum had really just taken off, right, and everything was going blockchain, everything, crypto projects. He was just looking at the stack and saying that if Web3 is really going to happen, well, just because the blockchain decentralizes it, the data and files not decentralized, that's still sitting in centralized servers. So the thesis was that the entire stack needs to be truly decentralized. And at that time, not many people were solving it. We're looking forward ahead that. So he said, why don't we focus on decentralized storage? And that's really kind of came about. But also to go back, how we stumbled upon that, it wasn't just random. We were actually doing consulting projects for some of the banks and insurance companies in Singapore. And we had built some applications on Ethereum for them, KYC, know your customer, flight times for insurance products. And we realized that when we're storing the data, and if we were doing it in centralized places and had to grab it. So that was kind of the thing was well, what takes it to a next level to have it all decentralized? So it did come about from work that we had been doing.
I think that's a very important piece to highlight for our viewers who may not be technically savvy, is that the blockchain itself is not a file storage layer. It's kind of more of an accounting or registry layer. and the block space commands a very high premium, right, for transaction processing. So traditionally, what developers would do is, like you said, it was they might record a smart contract or some transaction on a layer one like Ethereum, but the files themselves that underpin some of the applications, they would have to be stored on a traditional cloud server like an Amazon S3 bucket. And so, the stack itself, even though your transaction processing is decentralized and resilient, the file storage part of it is still subject to some kind of attack vector or centralized problem. So I think that's important, because I think a lot of people think that files themselves might get written to a blockchain, and that's not. I mean, you can imagine how expensive that would be.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how BlueZell attacked the problem, and maybe if you can talk a little bit about the difference between file storage and data storage, and is there a distinction there to be made, and how BlueZell might have approached that as opposed to maybe some other decentralized file storage applications.
I mean, early on, it was we focused on data storage to be a database, but over time to now, we realized that you had to be just storage in general. And if you got a storage system, then you can do files at the same time efficiently as well as data. It seemed like everybody, the bigger need was towards files. So initially, the concept was that, hey, if you have a bunch of decentralized nodes running, each one could file, whether it's data or files, they'll be stored on there. You use a consensus algorithm that will say that, hey, that file is actually sitting there, and the entire network decides it. That would be the big, then it's like, okay, the user or the customer knows that it's safe. The big thing was, okay, let's step back a bit. On Amazon S3 and other ones, traditional centralized, you can replicate it, right? Or you can get a backup. But what people don't realize that you're actually paying for backup. And the more you want to back it up, you got to pay more. And then depending on where the location is, you got to pay more or whatnot. And, they're all based on geographies. So our thesis was that, hey, using a decentralized storage network, two things are getting solved: redundancy and reliability. So redundancy meaning that you store it once, it'll be stored on many nodes at the same time and backed up. So you can, no matter if one node goes down or not, they're available everywhere else. Redundancy meant that, so even Amazon, we've seen it. Like if one area of Amazon goes down, AWS, you might not get your files, or you have to wait till servers come up. So the redundancy was based on, if you have a decentralized network, well, even if a bunch of files go down, or a geography, an area, because everything's scattered everywhere, randomized, your files, as long as it's available on one, and it should still be there. So those are really the big things. That the difference is, I think blockchain based systems, Web3 could offer redundancy and reliability. That was a core, to make it simple.
Hey there, revolutionaries. Thank you for tuning in. For more content like this, head over to realvision.com/crypto and get unlimited access to the most brilliant minds in finance and crypto. Join our community of lifelong learners for exclusive access, unparalleled education, and unbiased insights.